Welcome to episode 25 in the first season of Justice Centre Weekly, the video cast from the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms. I'm your host, Kevin Steele, and with me is John Carpay, the president and founder of the Centre. John is here today to give a rebuttal to a legal opinion regarding parental rights in Canada. The opinion in question is from Florence Ashley, a trans feminine law professor at the University of Alberta. FYI, according to the website run by LGBTQ Nation, a, quote, trans feminine person is typically someone who was assigned male at birth, AMAB, but identifies more closely with femininity than masculinity, unquote. In the video we're talking about, which was posted to TikTok and then reposted to X, Ashley puts forth the opinion that Canadians do not have parental rights.
There's also another layer in the Canadian context. Hi, I'm Florence Ashley. I'm a law professor at the University of Alberta, and I did my entire doctorate on basically trans youth in family law in Canada. And the piece that's missing from this puzzle is that parental rights are very much an American idea, one that does not really exist in Canada, in part because Canada is a signatory to the Convention on the Rights of the Child.
Parental rights are an American idea, not relevant to Canada, mainly because Canadians signed away all their parental rights when we adopted the UN's Rights of the Child. Okay, John, did I summarize that correctly? If you need to add any other relevant descriptions with your rebuttal, you're on.
It's quite the astounding video, and one of the most shocking things is right at the beginning. Florence Ashley says that that he or she did a doctorate in trans youth in family law in Canada, and I'm thinking, if you did an entire doctorate, you never came across Supreme Court of Canada rulings like BR versus Children's Aid Society of Metropolitan Toronto. You never read the Supreme Court of Canada decision upholding Section 43 of the Criminal Code, which makes it legal for parents to spank their children, as well as teachers and others in authority being able to use physical force to deal with children. For somebody to do their doctorate and not be familiar with Supreme Court of Canada cases, which I don't think Florence Ashley is, because if Florence Ashley, this U of A law prof, was familiar, then the assertion would not be made that there's no basis for parental rights in Canadian law at all. So that's quite shocking right at the beginning. For somebody who's done their entire doctorate and to either not be familiar with these Supreme Court of Canada cases at all, or to have read them and not caught what they say, and make these very bold assertions, which are simply not true.
Okay, I guess we haven't seen the doctoral thesis, but it does seem like that's being dismissed in favor of, I guess, this treaty or the larger rights of the child here. Does one trump the other?
Well, the starting point for parental rights is parental duties, obligations, responsibilities. So parents have not only a moral, but also a legal responsibility to care for their children, look after their children, provide their children with the necessities of life. And ultimately, if there is severe neglect, then parents can be criminally liable for failing to provide for their children. So there is a responsibility. Out of that responsibility, which, by the way, is a responsibility that Florence Ashley and various LGBTQ activists have no responsibility to care for or provide for or protect or nurture or look after other people's children. And there's a fundamental reality in life that the love that parents have for their own children is far, far, far greater than any level of concern that political activists might have for other people's children. I mean, there's a huge gaping chasm there. It's not even comparable. I'll get into that a little bit more in a moment. But we have where the parental rights comes from is the fact that parents have a duty and a responsibility to raise and educate their children. In order to carry out that responsibility, parents also need the right to make decisions on behalf of their children. And parents are the best situated to do that. Why? Well, number one, because parents love their children a lot more than outsiders might love the other people's children. And parents also have the knowledge. Parents know their own children far better than teachers and social workers and counselors. And of course, that's a generalization. You could find some parents who don't know their kids very well. So I'm going to read a passage from the Supreme Court of Canada decision. This is from the case of BR versus Children's Aid Society of Metropolitan Toronto, where the Honorable Justice Laforêt states, quote, "I would have thought it plain that the right to nurture a child, to care for its development, and to make decisions for it in fundamental matters such as medical care are part of the liberty interest of a parent. As observed by Dixon in the case of R versus Big M Drug Mart, the Charter was not enacted in a vacuum or absent a historical context. The common law has long recognized that parents are in the best position to take care of their children and make all the decisions necessary to ensure their well-being." Quoting from another 1957 Supreme Court of Canada decision, Laforêt quotes, "The view of the child's welfare conceives it to lie first within the warmth and security of the home provided by his parents." Laforêt goes on to say, "In recent years, courts have expressed some reluctance to interfere with parental rights, and state intervention has been tolerated only when necessity was demonstrated. This only serves to confirm that the parental interest in bringing up, nurturing, and caring for a child, including medical care and moral upbringing, is an individual interest of fundamental importance to our society." So those are pretty clear comments. Parents have a legal right, and there's liberty interest. This is in regards to the Charter Section 7, the right to life, liberty, security of the person. And so a person's liberty interest includes the right, if they are a parent, to raise their own kids and to make decisions on behalf of their own kids. And like any other right or freedom, those are only removed in extreme cases. For example, you have a liberty interest to be able to go where you please. You can leave your home, you can travel, you can visit with people. That's a starting point. Now, that liberty can be taken away if you are convicted of a serious offense and you're sentenced to jail, and now you got to spend time in prison. Well, now, as a convicted criminal, at least that's what it should be for people in jail. Not like Tamara Leach, spending time in jail and good pastors in Alberta locked up by former Premier Jason Kenney. But at least how it ought to be is that you have your liberty interest unless you've actually have been convicted of a crime. That's the starting point. You have the liberty interest. It could get taken away from you. So the starting point is that parents have a legal right to educate their own children. That could be taken away in cases of extreme neglect or in cases of abuse that go beyond the scope of permissible physical force, including spanking.
Okay. Well, I think that some of the argument that Professor Ashley puts forward revolves around the notion of the best interests of the child. And in particular, this is, I think, referring to gender transitions and social transitions of gender. And that being the school or the school system, would know the best interests of the child over the parents. Does that carry any weight?
Well, it's true that the law is concerned with the best interest of the child. That's very easy to say. It's something everybody could agree on. The practical question becomes who is in the best position to make decisions that are in the best interest of the child. would that be the child's own parents, or would that be Florence Ashley and LGBTQ activists that want to see these kids, the moment that there's any confusion whatsoever about gender identity, they want to have these kids start using opposite gender pronouns, opposite gender names, start using opposite gender bathrooms, and start taking puberty blockers, and move ahead towards life-altering, irreversible surgeries with the removal of healthy body parts. And it's so the best interest of the child. The evidence is that the Dr. Ken Zucker at the Gender Dysphoria Clinic in Toronto for many years helped hundreds of children and teenagers to become comfortable with their own bodies. And so children, if there's a boy who says that he's actually a girl trapped in a boy's body, or if there's a girl saying that she's really a boy, the best way to help those kids is not to put them on puberty blockers and get them on towards the futile quest of trying to become the other gender, which simply cannot happen anyways. It's just simply, it's biologically impossible. Every cell in our body is male or female, and you can mutilate your body and try to become the opposite sex, but in reality, you don't become the opposite sex. So this is the challenge that we're facing in Canada, is we have these activists who declare falsely that there are no parental rights, right? Which is just a psychological warfare to get people to feel intimidated, because they want to push these kids towards irreversible damage and lifelong infertility, not to mention also a lifelong dependence on opposite sex hormones. You are looking at surgeries and drugs for the rest of your life if you go fully down that road. And the suicide rate amongst fully transitioned people 7 years out, that suicide rate is many multiple times that of the average population. So if anybody tries to scare you with threats of, this is going to lead people to kill themselves, sadly, the people that have fully transitioned to the opposite sex, they have a very high suicide rate.
Okay. One thing I noticed in just doing a quick bit of background on the professor, this argument that's being put forward now seems to be an extension of arguments they made earlier about conversion therapy. And I guess that's kind of interesting, considering that, conversion to opposite gender is fairly extreme. Anyways, yeah, they won the battle on conversion therapy in that
it can be illegal for parents to love and support and affirm their own children, and it can be and probably is illegal, depending on the situation and the circumstances, for parents that, if there's a boy who feels uncomfortable with his male body, it could be illegal, depending on circumstances, for parents to encourage that boy to accept his birth gender. It would be illegal for counselors, psychologists, therapists to assist children in embracing the reality of the gender that they were born with. That is illegal. And so there's no choice left for parents to be able to properly help and support and affirm their own children.
Well, do you find it a little bit ironic that, they would be arguing against conversion therapy in sexuality, but in gender, conversion is the goal? It seems to me it's the same type of argument, and they're working at cross purposes here, but I don't think they recognize that.
Well, the ban on the so-called conversion therapy was an extremely intellectually dishonest project from the start. The vast majority of Canadians support the idea that adults should be able to choose their own counseling for any kind of sexual issues, and that should be, just as 50 years ago, Pierre Elliott Trudeau said, the government has no business in the bedrooms of the nation. You could argue today, and I would argue, that the government has no business in the psychologists' offices or the counselor's couch, or the pastor's office when mature adults want to talk about their sexual problems, sexual issues, et cetera, et cetera. So this ban on conversion therapy in Canada is very one-directional. So if there is, if a man goes to see a counselor and says, "Hey, I think I might be a woman trapped inside a man's body," the only type of therapy that the counselor can provide is to say, "Okay, well, I'll help you to explore that, and you can start dressing like a woman. You can start taking estrogen, and so on and so forth." Conversely, if there's a guy who has been dressing like a woman and trying to be a woman for many years, but now begins to have some doubts about that and starts to think, "You know what, maybe I am a man after all. Maybe I should just change my lifestyle and no longer pursue this," that person could not get any psychological counseling in Canada because that would be illegal for the counselor to help a man who had been living as a woman, who had been identifying as a woman, who may or may not have had surgeries. For a man to detransition, they can't get counseling or mental health support. That is illegal. That's thanks to this conversion therapy, which has a very clever name that gets people to support it. Because obviously, right. I mean, nobody believes in, you can't even force somebody into some therapy that they don't want in the first place. It's not going to work, okay? Everybody's against forced conversion. Everybody's against force. But this legislation was crafted in a way to capitalize on people's legitimate opposition to forced or coercive therapy.
And if I understood the whole argument correctly, it was also based on an outdated notion of what conversion therapy is as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's no, okay, in the 40s and 50s and 60s, when homosexuality was considered to be a mental illness, and there were some therapies that were used to try to get same-sex attracted people to somehow develop or acquire an attraction to the opposite sex. So that did happen in the 40s and 50s, and probably in the years prior to that. That has been stopped and outlawed a very long time ago. So, but the whole, we got to ban conversion therapy. Again, it's this intellectually dishonest suggestion that this is still going on today. That you've got therapies to try to force gay people to become straight, when that is not the case. And every psychological association in Canada, and these are provincial bodies, they've already outlawed the conversion therapy. It's just not an issue. You don't need legislation to ban it because it's already been banned.
But now we've moved on from that argument. The same people that made that argument are now making these arguments here that, parents have no rights now because, it's a one-way street. It's we know what's best. As soon as the child says that they have doubts, then, you're on the road to gender transition. Do you see, I don't see any compatibility between the two. Do you? The two being what? Being conversion therapy and gender transition. I see them, as being almost like cross purposes. In other words, it's almost like taking away someone's right to choose in both circumstances. In order to support your right, we got to take away your right to choose.
But it's very sad what happens to these children. They are. I listened to a speaker who had a woman who had her uterus removed and had her breasts removed and had a deep voice and a beard. And this woman was persuaded that she was actually a man trapped in a woman's body, and went through all these steps of having her uterus and breasts removed. And she said that when she was in the peer support group, the trans peer support group, she was told repeatedly and consistently that anybody who disagreed with this surgery, anybody who disagreed with the direction that she was moving in, was hateful and bigoted and did not love her. And so in that kind of a closed bubble, don't talk to your parents, don't get a second opinion, don't get a diversity of viewpoints. In that context, people get pressured, and they get told that anybody who disagrees with their steps towards attempting a futile gender transition, that those are all the enemy, and they're bad people, they're hateful, they're transphobic, so on and so forth. So that's horribly sad. And this woman deeply regretted getting her uterus and breasts removed. So it's very sad what's going on, and it's harming kids. Back to Dr. Ken Zucker in Toronto, he successfully treated hundreds of students, of children and teenagers. By the time that they were 18, something like 97% or 95%, 93%, 90% of these children were comfortable with their biological body. Many of them were same-sex attracted, and but they were comfortable with their body, and so they were spared this horrible fate of a lifetime of surgeries and drugs. And so that's where the medical evidence is, and yet we've got these activists that pretend that the only way to help kids is to put them on puberty blockers and get them to transition socially by using opposite sex pronouns and names.
Yeah, I think with the detransition movement, there's enough exceptions to disprove the rule. I mean, that's at least my opinion on that. You had mentioned the labeling of opposition as hate-filled. That's something that came up just recently in all these marches across Canada, the Million March for Children. And I understand you participated in one actually in Vernon, BC. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
That's correct. On Wednesday, September 20th, there were rallies across Canada, Victoria, Vancouver, Vernon, Kelowna, and all the way to Ottawa and all over the country. And I'm really encouraged because this is the first time ever that I recall seeing some serious pushback against political activists that want to indoctrinate our children and who want to sever or at least weaken, harm, destroy the tie between children and parents. And never before have I seen this kind of pushback where parents are saying, no, I don't want my 5-year-old son getting told by anybody at school that, you know, he might be a girl, or that if he's playing with a doll that he gets told that he's actually a girl trapped in a boy's body. We forget, like, and I think I mentioned this before, Kevin, if I told you right now, hey, Kevin, you're a woman, you're gonna shrug it off. You're not going to lose sleep over it. It's not going to have a devastating psychological impact on you. But conversely, if you were 5 years old and I was your teacher and I said, Kevin, you're actually a girl, or if I said, Kevin, boys don't exist, boys are not real. If I'm your teacher, if I'm an authority figure, that could really mess with your mind in a really big way. And so parents are saying no, they don't want their kids getting indoctrinated or into this transgender ideology. They don't want teachers or social workers or political activists messing with their children's minds.
I was going to ask you, did you get to speak to anybody directly, or did you get some good dialogue going with people there? I don't need you to name any names, but I'm interested in what people on the ground are saying.
Well, I was very honored to share the stage with Dr. Charles Hoff, who is a courageous physician in British Columbia, who is gone through hell for disagreeing with the government's narrative on COVID and lockdowns and the vaccines, et cetera, et cetera. So a very courageous doctor who is facing disciplinary proceedings by the Anti-Science College of Physicians and Surgeons of British Columbia, which does not want any scientific debate. Therefore, they are anti-science. So it was a real honor to meet him, to share the stage with him. And it was actually another of the speakers there, and this made me very sad, of course, and was this woman named Kelly, who had her uterus and breast removed. Oh. That was one of the speakers speaking out transgender regret. And the rally in Vernon had over 200 people there. There was a separate rally about 30 meters away, and it was a LGBTQ rally. And I applaud those people exercising their free speech rights. I applaud the fact that they had their own rally, did not, heckle and jeer and interrupt and try to shut down somebody else's expression. Because even though I'm a fierce advocate for free expression, there's a boundary there that free expression does not entitle you to interrupt or heckle somebody else or shut down somebody else's speech. Because you have this insidious argument that's used, I can go crash your meeting and shut down your meeting and interrupt your meeting and make it impossible for you to be heard because I'm just exercising my free speech rights. Well, that's simply not true. You can exercise your own free speech rights. That does not give you a right to shut down somebody else's speech. So kudos to the LGBTQ people in Vernon who had their own counter rally, but the rallies didn't interfere with each other. They had their own sound system and their own microphone, and you could vaguely hear that some things were being said or, music was being played or whatever, and, they could vaguely hear ours. They had their separate event. That was really good. Did not pan out that way for Megan Murphy in Vancouver, I'm told. Megan Murphy is a TERF, a trans-exclusionary radical feminist. That's kind of a pejorative term. But Megan Murphy is a feminist who says that women are entitled to their own safe spaces, like change rooms, locker rooms, female prisons, rape crisis centers, et cetera, female-only sporting events. And so she's a feminist who supports the right of, a man to dress up as a woman if he chooses to do that, but that he should not be allowed access into women's sports or women's change rooms, et cetera. So I am told that her speech was crashed by a bunch of activists, showed up on stage and created a ruckus. And then the police came along and said, we're shutting down this entire event completely for safety reasons.
Mission accomplished.
Which is despicable on the part of the police because you've got a perpetrator and a victim. Megan Murphy is the victim of what could be criminal conduct. I wasn't there. If they touched her, or even if they interfered with the lawful use and enjoyment of property, a criminal code section that Tamara Leach is charged with, by the way, which she has not violated. But here's a clear example. If you interrupt somebody else's rally, you are interfering with the lawful use and enjoyment of their sound system, their microphone, their stage, so on and so forth. And they should be criminally charged. The people who disrupt this event should be criminally charged. And yet the police just ignores the distinction between these criminals and their criminal activity versus the victim like Megan Murphy and the people who choose to listen to Megan Murphy, and the police shut down the entire event. So that's a sad example of a peaceful protest that got wrongfully shut down in Vancouver.
Yeah, there were a few problems across Canada. I know that there clashes with the protest on the Million March for Children that day. I'm glad to hear that yours in Vernon was at least acceptable. That's good. Great. Any last thoughts on that before we finish up?
Well, I'm extremely encouraged by what the governments in New Brunswick and Saskatchewan have done. Both have policies that require parents to be consulted and informed, and you need to seek the consent of parents if children under the age of 16 are going to start using opposite gender names or pronouns or clothing or bathrooms or whatever. Parents should be involved. And it appears that both provinces are standing firm. The Justice Centre is providing legal representation for two interveners in the Saskatchewan court action, where an LGBTQ group has launched a court challenge to strike down Saskatchewan's policy of requiring parental consent. And so the Justice Centre is involved in that case. We anticipate also being involved in litigation in New Brunswick as well. But it's really great to see Canadians standing up for parental rights and not allowing themselves to be intimidated by the same old, boring name calling, homophobic, transphobic, hateful, bigot, anti-science, whatever, all of the name calling, Canadians are less and less being intimidated by that. So that's wonderful. So I think we should all feel encouraged by what we're seeing on this front, with so many people publicly, unabashedly speaking up for parental rights. And closing word, my thanks as always to the donors to the Justice Centre. You make it possible for us to work every day to advocate for freedom in the court of law and in the court of public opinion. So thank you to those who donate to support our work.
And thank you, John, for participating in this episode of Justice Centre Weekly and giving us that rebuttal to the opinion of the U of A law professor. Thanks so much, and I hope to speak to you again soon.
Talk to you soon, Kevin.